In part one, we examine why observers predict the collapse of the Alliance of the Sahel State. In part two, we explored why those predictions failed and why so many analysts underestimated the AES. Now in part three, we examine a question that may be even more important. If the Alliance of the Sahel State was supposed to fail, and if it didn't, how are neighboring countries responding to that reality? Because just days after Benin's new president took office, something happened that looked ordinary on the surface. A diplomatic visit, a conversation, a meeting, nothing unusual, or so I thought. Because when a new president entered office, every early decision sent a message. Every meeting sent a signal. Every priority revealed what matters the most. And yet, one of the first major diplomatic moves made by Benin's new president involved the Alliance of the Sahel State. Why? And why so quickly? Why now? The more I examined the situation, the more I began to wonder whether this wasn't just another diplomacy. What if it was about recognizing a new reality in West Africa, a reality that many observers are only now beginning to understand? And that is what we are going to explore today. But first, we need to understand what changed. For years, Benin occupied a strategically important position in the regional trade. The port of Cotonou served as one of the primary gateways into Niger and parts of the Sahel. Goods flow north. Business prosper. Government benefits. Trade generated influence. Then relationship deteriorated. Political tension emerged. Trust weakened. Trade slowed. Many observers believed they already knew how the story would end. Excuse me. The logic seems straightforward. Niger depends heavily on access through Benin Port Cotonou. The AES would face economic pressure. Eventually, they would have little choice but to compromise. At least that was the expectation, but that isn't what happened. Instead, the AES adapt. New trade routes emerge. Alternative partnership develop. Supply chain adjusted. Business adjusted. Market adjusted. And slowly a different reality began to take shape. At first, I thought this story was about what Benin had lost. Then I realized the more important question might be what the AES has gained. And that changes everything. But before we get into the answer, there's another part of this story that most people overlooked. Most decisions focus on government, presidents, policies, diplomatic duties, military alliance, but government are only one part of the story. The people never truly separated. Family remains connected. Community remains connected. Trade still need customers. Business still need markets. Political dispute disturb commerce, but it didn't erase geographic. It didn't erase history, and it didn't erase economic reality. That matters because economies has a way of reshaping politics over time. Sometimes government create barriers, then economic reality create incentive to remove them. And that may be exactly what we are witnessing today. Before we continue, I'd like your opinion. Do politics shape economics, or does economics eventually force politics to change? Let me know in the comment. While you're there, tell me which country you're watching from. I always enjoy seeing how far the West-based media community reach. Now let's look at the details that completely change how I view this story. At this point, I thought I understood what was happening. Then I discovered one detail that completely changed my interpretation of the story. The president of Benin is not a political outsider. He is not someone arrived without knowledge of what happened over the last several years. In fact, before he becomes president, he served as Benin finance minister under Patrice Talon. That matters because if anyone understood economics, consequences, deteriorations, relationship with Niger and the wider Sahel region, it would be the person responsible for managing the country's finance. He would have seen the numbers. He would have understood what reduced activity through the port of Cotonou meant for business, government revenue, and regional influence. Think about that for a moment. This wasn't a decision made by someone guessing. This wasn't a decision made by someone unfamiliar with economics reality. This was a decision made by a man who spent years overseeing Benin finance. And yet one of the first significant diplomatic priority was engaging with the Alliance of the Sahel. Why? If a former finance minister moved quickly to engage the AES shortly after taking office, what does that tell us? Was this simple routine diplomacy, or was it recognition of an economic reality that could no longer be ignored? And that's where this story becomes much more interesting, because when persons making decision is a former finance minister, every diplomatic move carries economic calculation behind it. And that brings us to a timeline that deserves a closer look. First came Africa Forward Summit in Nairobi. Then came Wagdagni inaugurations. Representative from the AES country attended. Soon afterwards came outreach and engagement with the AES leader. Now, maybe that coincide, maybe it isn't. But when several significant events occur within a short period, they deserve closer examination. Viewers separated each event appear routinely. Viewer together, they raise a larger question. Was this simple formal diplomacy, or are we witnessing the early stage of a broader regional adjustment? I don't claim to know the answer, but I do think it's a question worth asking. If you're enjoying this analysis so far, take a moment to hit the like button. It helps more people discover throughout discussion to a thoughtful discussion about Africa, geopolitics, and a major shift taking place across the continent. Now let's get to what I believe is the most important part of the story. Most people ask, why did Benin reach out to the AES? But I think that's the wrong question. The better question is, why could Benin no longer afford to ignore the AES? Think about what happened. The AES survived, it adapted, it found alternative routes, it developed new partners, it continued functioning despite enormous pressure. And whether people support the AES or oppose it, one fact remained. It became impossible to ignore. But there's another reason this matters. This is a former finance minister, a man who spent years studying revenue, trade, investment, economic growth. If anyone understood the cost of losing access to major regional market, it's him. Which is why his decision emerged to engage the AES so early may be more significant than many observers realize. Countries do not rush to engage actors they consider irrelevant. They engage actors they consider important. And that may be the most significant signal of all. What if it was evidence that Benin recognized a reality many observers are only now beginning to understand? And if that's true, then this story becomes much bigger than a single diplomatic visit. At first, I thought this was a story about trade. Then I thought it was a story about policy. Then I thought it was a story about influence. But perhaps it's all three, because influence follows economics, economics follow relationship, and relationships are difficult to erase when geographic history and people continue pulling nation together. Perhaps this story isn't really about who won or who lost. Perhaps it's about government adapting to reality that already exists. And whether those adjustments comes early or later, those reality remains. Perhaps Benin is considering something that many outside observers have not yet fully grasped. The West Africa landscape is changing. New alliances are emerging. Old assumptions are being tested. And countries throughout the region are being forced to adjust. The question is no longer whether change is happening. The question now is how government choose to respond. If you have been enjoying this AES series, I want you want more in-depth analysis of political, economics, and geopolitical changes taking place across Africa, consider subscribing to West Best Media. We don't just follow headlines. We explore deeper trends shaping the future of the continent. And trust me, the story of the AES is far from over.